All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good friend David Waldman. David is a contributing editor at Daily Kos, which you can of course find at dailykos.com. He is also the host of the great radio show Kagro in the Morning, which of course you can also find at dailykos.com. You can also find him on Twitter at KagroX. David, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Hi, Matt. Thanks. It's a great pleasure to be here again.
So, David, there is a chance, it actually looks like we actually may get some type of filibuster reform in the upcoming Senate, but it might be good, it might be bad. So just lay it out for us. How is filibuster reform actually looking at this point?
Well, the prospects for something happening are very good, but we don't know exactly what just yet, but they need to hash that out. But it sure looks like this time around we started out with a much greater advantage, a head start, really, in working towards filibuster reform that we didn't have last time. Last time we needed to do 2 or 3 or even more jobs in trying to push for filibuster reform. 1, to make the case that it was necessary, although that wasn't too hard. 2, last time we needed to make the case that it was possible, that it was something that the Senate could actually do for itself with just a majority vote, at least under certain circumstances. And that was a big barrier to get over last time around. This time it seems to be the assumption of most people covering the story that that can happen and they understand how it can happen. So that really has kind of opened the floodgates. And now the third issue, which is exactly what should we do? What should the Senate do in order to fix its filibuster problem while still being mindful of the Senate's tradition in protecting the rights of the minority party, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's plenty to go around. This time, though, we've gotten over that big barrier, and everyone seems to be working under the assumption that it can and will happen, and we now have to kind of define the shape of that reform. So that's been a big change.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a positive sign because, again, I mean, so where do you actually fall on this? Because it's like, I'm someone who believes that there should be some type of filibuster, but obviously the way Republicans have used it for, recently is insane, essentially. Yeah. I mean, but like in some ways actually having some type of filibuster is important, but again, so where do you actually fall on how you would like to actually see this look?
I'm torn on it myself. I mean, on the one hand, my study, I guess, of the Congress as an institution and the history that goes into understanding the context in which you're reforming all that stuff, kind of gives you an added respect for the traditions of the Senate, at least the traditions as they were supposed to be practiced. And so you get an appreciation for the filibuster as an interesting tool in protecting certain rights. But of course, the history also teaches you that it's been used, even when used in the traditional ways, was used for some pretty lousy and nefarious ends in the past too. I'm thinking here in particular of the civil rights struggle. But, we've also seen it used to leverage some protections for things that we as progressives like, at least at certain times in the past. In general, though, it's hard to defend in theory why it is that you should elect a body of Congress, like the House, to work on a majoritarian principle, and then the same people, us, elect our senators in the same way, and why should that not work in the same fashion? So I'm a little torn between the idea of saying, well, let's just let the majority carry the day and allow for a lot of debate and a lot more flexible debate in the Senate, but why not allow them to just work their will as a majority? So I'm a little torn, but I think that there's certainly room for a reformed filibuster that makes it something that's difficult to carry out. And if it's difficult to carry out, the hope is, and that hope is one that the reformers have placed a lot of faith in. The hope is that if it's tough to do, it'll be kind of self-limiting. It'll be the sort of thing that, while available to you in theory on anything you want to use it on, if it really is taking its toll on you to carry one out, you'll do it a lot more strategically, and then we'll get back to the old balance of, yes, you can protect the minority party's rights to be heard by having this rule out there, but no, they won't be doing it on absolutely everything because it'll cost you in time, in energy, and it'll have a physical cost, etc. And that's kind of what's driving the shape of the reforms as they're coming into focus now. The big reform that people are pushing for is to have this, what they're calling the talking filibuster, which would bring us back to the sort of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington style of ongoing stand on the floor, talk yourself blue in the face kind of filibuster that most people really thought was still the way the filibuster actually worked. So there's the advantage there for the reformers in saying, in facing the criticism from Republicans who say, oh, you're going to destroy the Senate and change the way it works, and all sorts of horrible things are going to happen. If in the end what you ended up with is the way most people thought the Senate worked anyway, it's the kind of reform you think you can get away with.